Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is time for another true crime video yet again, and today we will be talking about the crazy story of Stephen Pladl and Katie Fusco. So I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name, if it's Pladl, but it's spelled Pladl. But anyway, in 1995, Stephen Pladl was a 20-year-old man who met a 15-year-old girl named Alyssa online. Stephen was from New York while Alyssa was from Texas. Now, a 5-year age gap isn't really that big, but considering that the other party was only 15 years old, this is very illegal. Stephen and Alyssa then started talking constantly and eventually met up in person. After a few meetups, Stephen was finally able to convince Alyssa to leave her life in Texas and come live with him in New York. Now, I have no idea how Alyssa's parents felt about this, and I'm not really sure about what her home life was like. But at 16 years old, she moved into a different state with a grown ass man. He was already 21 at the time and he had successfully groomed this 16-year-old girl. In January of 1998, Alyssa gave birth to their first daughter, whom she named Denise. And she was overjoyed. She loved her baby. She adored her. However, it wasn't the same for Stephen. For some reason, he would always end up hurting baby Denise. Just for the fun of it, he had always been abusive towards Alyssa physically, verbally, and emotionally. But Alyssa didn't really get why Stephen would do the same things to their innocent baby, who had done nothing wrong to him. Turns out, Stephen would pinch baby Denise all over her body for seemingly no reason at all. And he did this so often that the infant would be covered with bruises all over her tiny body. And whenever Denise would cry, Stephen would lock her up inside a cooler to muffle her cries. In a few instances, he would also even cover her mouth in an attempt to shut her up. And he would do this almost to the point of suffocating her. And of course, Alyssa tried her best to prevent things like this from happening. However, whenever she did, Stephen would then start abusing her, making it impossible for her to protect her child. And aside from the abuse, Stephen was also very lazy. He had no job and expected the now 17-year-old Alyssa to do everything for him. So basically, she was tasked of taking care of her newborn and to make money for survival. Alyssa also noted how abusive Stephen was towards animals, and this just caused her to be more fearful of him. And if you are a true crime fan, you already know that people who are abusive towards animals aren't the best people. This is usually one of the common traits of people who commit heinous crimes. At this point, Alyssa was just terrified of what could happen to Denise if she stayed with them. So just months after giving birth, Alyssa made the hardest decision of her life. She decided to put 8-month-old baby Denise up for adoption. Baby Denise was then legally adopted by Tony and Kelly Fusco, who were also from New York, but a few miles away. Her name was then changed from Denise to Katie Fusco, and she was raised by Tony and Kelly along with their biological children in a small trailer park community in New York, around 80 miles away from where Stephen and Alyssa lived. Now, this trailer park was said to have a good community and was a way better environment to grow up in. Katie was quite well known in the community as a shy yet very kind-hearted girl. She absolutely loved animals and was very passionate about art. She grew up drawing and loved making her own comic strips. And she was even part of the cheerleading squad. Now, after graduating from high school, at this time, I think she was about to graduate, but she planned to go to university or college and take up digital advertising. Now, during this time, Katie was actually about to graduate from high school. She planned on taking up digital advertising in college. However, as she grew older, she also grew more curious about who her biological parents were and what they were like. Now, according to her adoptive parents, Tony and Kelly, Katie always knew that she was adopted and they never kept this from her. So when she told them of her plans on trying to look for her biological parents, they were not opposed to the idea at all. I mean, they were part of her life, whether they were in it or not. So in 2016, when Katie was 18 years old, she started to look for them online and eventually found them on Facebook. Now, I'm not sure if she reached out to Steven or Alyssa, but she talked to one of them, reconnected, and they responded enthusiastically. She started getting close with them and decided to finally visit them in Virginia where they now lived. And surprisingly, despite the abusive nature of, well, not the relationship, despite Steven's abusive nature, Steven and Alyssa stayed together after all these years. In fact, they now had two daughters as well. So they had two daughters after having Katie. One of these daughters was born in 2007 and the other in 2012. Now, once Katie met her biological parents, she just felt a strong connection with them. So instead of going to college to pursue digital advertising, she decided to move in with them in Virginia instead. And Alyssa was not comfortable with letting Katie stay with them unless she knew the truth about why she was put up for adoption in the first place. So she pulled her daughter aside one day and told her that Stephen, her biological father, was very abusive towards her when she was an infant, and that Alyssa had no other choice but to put her up for adoption for her own safety. Now, Alyssa was, of course, expecting a big reaction from Katie. However, she didn't really show any emotion and was pretty chill about it. In fact, after finding out about this, Katie became even closer with her biological dad. Now, 2 months into Katie moving in, Alyssa started to notice that Steven was putting in way more effort on how he looked. He started wearing trendier clothes, shaved off his beard, and even changed his hairstyle. It was as if he was trying to make himself look younger. Steven also started sleeping in Katie's room. He would allegedly sleep on the floor, but he would do this every single night. And honestly, it is super weird. It's not like Katie was scared to sleep by herself because she was an 18-year-old woman and had already been there for months. And when Alyssa confronted Steven about this, reminding him that although they didn't raise her, this was still their child, he simply stormed off and took Katie out with him. Now, I have no idea what they did or where they went, but because of this, Alyssa eventually moved out in November 2016 as their divorce was being finalized. They shared custody of their two younger daughters, but they ultimately stayed with their mother, Alyssa, and would only visit Stephen during the weekends. Now, Katie, on the other hand, decided to stay with her dad, Stephen. A few months after moving out, for some reason, I guess this is pretty normal for a few parents to do just to know what their kids are up to. But Alyssa decided to read her daughter's journal and she was mortified. She saw how her second daughter complained after being told by Steven to start calling Katie mom. And to Alyssa's horror, She also saw a drawing which showed Katie with a huge belly. One part of the journal entry read, "She is pregnant and gained weight, and dad calls her baby. Did he make her pregnant? My dad even says she is my stepmom. WTF. Katie is my sister. She's probably his wife now, but in nature, she's only my sister." And of course, Alyssa was horrified by all of this, but decided to call Steven anyway to figure out if there was any truth behind this. And surprisingly, he didn't even try to deny any of it. He simply confirmed that Katie was indeed pregnant and that he was the father. Apparently, Steven and Katie immediately started having sexual relations as soon as Alyssa and the two little girls moved out. The kids also said that whenever they would come visit, they would see that their dad and Katie would sleep in the same room. Now, obviously, Alyssa reported this to the police. The entire family were interviewed separately, including the two girls. However, no arrests were made. After her divorce with Steven was finalized, Alyssa and her two younger daughters then moved to North Carolina to distance themselves from everything that was happening in Virginia. And the following year, 2017, Steven and Katie applied for their marriage license, which they were able to obtain by lying about how they were actually related. I mean, legally, they didn't have the same last name, so I guess there wasn't really any reason to question if they were father and daughter. In July of that same year, the pair got married, and shockingly, Katie's adoptive parents, as well as Steven's mom, aka Katie's own grandmother, were in attendance and all smiles for the wedding. Now, according to Katie's adoptive parents, there was nothing else that they could do, so they just supported Katie all the way, which is absurd. They honestly could have reported this to the authorities to back up and support Alyssa's prior report. However, they decided to be on board with the marriage. Now, in September 2017, Katie gave birth to her son/brother, Bennett. And although she and Steven thought that they had already gotten away with everything, this was not the case at all. In January of 2018, they were both arrested for adultery, incest, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, but were both released on bail. After they were released, Katie was ordered to cut off all contact with Steven and to move back in with her adoptive parents, Tony and Kelly. Baby Bennett, on the other hand, was handed over to Steven's mother for the time being. I guess the authorities and Child Protective Services were still trying to figure out what was best for the baby at the time. Now, a few months after being court-ordered to have zero contact with Steven, Katie decided to get in contact with him. And this was in April 2018. Katie called her husband/father, Steven, telling him of her decision to break things off. And of course, Steven did not take this well at all. In a fit of rage, he went to his mother's house and took baby Bennett. I have no idea if he was forcefully taken or if grandma willingly gave the baby to him, but it didn't seem like she was at a panic as she didn't really report this to the authorities. I mean, Steven was the father, so I guess he was pretty much allowed to do whatever he wants. Now, Steven left 7-month-old Bennett at home and decided to drive all the way to New York to Katie's house. He saw her getting into a truck with her adoptive dad, Tony, and this is when Steven started following their vehicle. Apparently, he had rented a minivan so that Katie wouldn't recognize his car, and it worked. Katie and Tony had no idea that they were being followed by Steven. And once he pulled up next to them in an intersection, he opened fire to their truck before fleeing the scene. Steven then called his mother and confessed to everything that he had done. He told his mother that he killed Katie and Tony and baby Bennett. He killed his 7-month-old child before he left Virginia. His mother then called 911, and here is an audio clip for that.
Carry 911, address of the emergency.
Yes. My son just called me, and he told me oh my God, he killed his baby, and he's in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby? Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name? Okay, what's your home address?
I'm not there. That's his house.
Okay, what's his address? Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
He's not home. His wife broke up with him over the phone yesterday, and he told me, she's in New York, and he told me he was on his way. He called me last night and said he's on his way. He's going to bring the baby to her, and then he was coming back. And he
Okay.
He said he killed his wife, he killed her father, and I can't even believe this is happening.
And did this happen in Nightdale?
No, his wife and father are in New York.
Okay, so the incident actually...
he left the baby dead when he left.
Okay, where did he leave the baby?
Okay, he said it was in the...
What's his last name?
Same as mine.
When did this happen?
He said he left last night. He called me, I forget, maybe about 7 last night, and said he was on his way to New York. He was going to bring to his wife and give it to her, and then he'd be back. And he called me this morning. I just got off the phone just a couple of minutes ago, and oh God, he told me to call the police, that I shouldn't go over there.
Okay, so so your son is not there?
No, the house is empty. He said he put a key under the front mat. A key to get into the house under the front mat.
Did he say how he did it, or what
no,
he did?
And I didn't ask him. I didn't want to know. Oh my God, he's such a wonderful little...
Okay, hold on just a second, okay?
Katie and her adoptive father, Tony, were then found inside their vehicle with multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso. They were both declared dead on the scene. Baby Bennett's body was also retrieved from Stephen's house. He was found in a closet with no visible signs of trauma, but it is suspected that he was suffocated to death. Now, of course, a manhunt for Stephen began immediately, but it didn't take very long for the police to locate him. Just a few minutes after the 911 call was made by his mother, authorities found his minivan on the side of the road, and upon closer inspection, they found Stephen inside, slumped over after he took a gun to his own head. And that is where this story ends. Honestly, I have very mixed feelings about this case. I do not know how to feel about this at all. I've heard other people saying that Stephen was the only one to blame and Katie was groomed by her own father. I've also heard people saying that they were both at fault because she was an adult at this point, but I don't know. I mean, Katie was already 18 at the time. However, it also could be possible that she was just trying to seek her father's approval, and this is where it led to. I mean, whoever's at fault here, baby Bennett, Katie, and Tony did not deserve to die. And yes, I specifically left Stephen out because I don't really care about him. He was a very abusive father. He was a very abusive husband. And he married his own daughter. It's just sick, you know? And anyway, as usual, I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think it was only Steven's fault? Do you think it was both of their faults? Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a comment down below. And that is pretty much all that I have for this case. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on my next video.